we're going to continue our discussion of the different elements of an effective safety management system. I've talked about elements of an effective safety management system. We could also relabel that as things that safety managers should be doing to have the biggest impact on their companies, or things that companies should be doing to improve their safety performance. And one of those things, or one of the elements for effective safety management, is internal auditing or monitoring of work operations. You need to have someone out there monitoring, observing, identifying potential problems, environments that could result in injury or incident, hazards in the workplace, and so on. And observing and evaluating operations. And this certainly is the role of a safety professional, but involvement across all different personnel groupings is important. It's if you can involve project and plant management in your safety monitoring activities, it's going to be more effective. Also involving line or craft personnel. One thing that I always tried to do at Kiewit when I was involved in any kind of auditing or inspecting or monitoring, I would try to have at least one worker do the walk around with me, get their perspective, get their inputs. Made my life a little bit easier because a lot of times I'd see something that wasn't quite right, and instead of me spouting my opinion, so and so, what do you think about that? Is there something we could do differently here? Is something that could be corrected? Is there a safer way? So involving other people as much as you can is a wise move on the part of a safety manager. If you can, get those upper management people involved in the monitoring also. When I say make the boss get involved, I'm talking about upper management. And the better companies, the upper management will already be involved. They'll be doing their own monitoring, their own auditing. But in the companies that don't have the more reactive companies that don't have a well-developed safety culture, you may have to persuade them, you may have to stay after them to get them involved in the process. When you perform inspections, audits, monitoring, you need to have a procedure for documenting your efforts. Also should be a procedure for reviewing the documentation. Over here on the right is an example of a form that I used when I was with Manhattan Road Bridge. I called this what did I call this? Oh, safety contact report. It's been so long I forgot what I called it there for a second. Just a 1 or 2 page quick hitting type of documentation for my monitoring activities. Has all the project information up here, who the supervisor is, some notes. The notes usually what are they doing during the particular operation, equipment that's being used, and so on. Now, let me just read this one to you to give you an example. Hanging concrete beams span 2 and 3 from the south abutment using northwest 500-ton crane operating at a 151-foot radius. Even with such a large capacity crane at this extended radius, the crane was approaching its structural limits. Boom deflection was noticeable, and operator had to be careful not to get the load bouncing. Great fall protection for Fabian's crew. Fabian was the supervisor, and they did a good job with traffic control. There weren't any deficiencies. And then some photos of the operation. This was a night operation. A lot of times when we're working along interstates, this was Interstate 49 in northwest Arkansas in the Rogers area. A lot of times we have to do it at night when the traffic levels are at their lowest. But there are other ways of documenting inspections or audits, but this is a method that I liked. A lot of safety managers, a lot of companies will use checklists. I'm not a fan of checklists because they become check the box, pencil whip the form, and it's not real meaningful. I like the narrative approach. I think it's a little more meaningful when it's narrative. You can use both. You don't have to use one or the other. You could use both. And there would be some monitoring activities where I would use more of a checklist in the monitoring. The checklists are, for you just starting out, the checklists are really an important aid because it reminds you of what you need to be looking for. After you've done it 15 to 20 years, 10 years, maybe even 5 years, you don't need the checklist to tell you what you should be looking for. But when you're just starting out, the checklist is kind of like your cheat sheet for what you should be looking for when you're out there doing your monitoring. And I've already talked about documentation. Just a little bit of terminology here, just some clarification. Audits and inspections are not necessarily the same thing. We use these terms interchangeably in the safety profession, but audits a lot of times focus more on the safety management processes. When we audit a company's safety management system, we're looking at the processes they use to manage safety within their organization. On the other hand, inspections focused more on unsafe acts, unsafe conditions, and operations. This is more of an inspection report here, not so much an auditing report. But what you'll run into, people use the terms interchangeably, and that's fine. That's fine to use the terms interchangeably as far as I'm concerned. One other thing I should say about inspections, especially as it pertains to documentation. I'm kind of old school, pencil paper, but more and more companies are using digital technology for their documentation. You probably are going to go to work for a company that does not use pencil paper forms for auditing. It'll probably be a form that's loaded onto an iPad or other device, and you will fill out the form on that device. So, and even toward the end of my time as a field safety professional, I more and more digital. I used less and less paper as I got toward the end of my field career in safety management. This form, in fact, I did all of it on a computer. I would take notes in the field. Then when I would get to the office or get to the truck, wherever I was doing up the report, I'd open up the computer, type everything in, upload my pictures, and save it as a digital file, save it as a PDF. And once PDF form, I would send it around the company to whoever needed to see it. Training is essential for a successful safety system. You got to have training. It's one of the 5 E's. And I think I'm safe with this estimate here. This certainly is what I experienced. 25 to 50% of a safety manager's duties are training related. We do a lot of training. That's why I include a lot of speaking presentation assignments in my classes to help better prepare you for your role as a trainer. One of the types of analyses that we will occasionally perform is a gap analysis. A gap analysis is used to identify training needs. The gap analysis, in a gap analysis, first you identify where the worker is and their level of knowledge or their level of skill. Then you determine where they should be with their knowledge or skill. And once that gap between where they're at and where they should be is identified, that will help us determine what types of training those employees need. Persuading management, every turn, if you're with a company that doesn't really value safety, you're always persuading management. When it comes to training and getting training time, you have to persuade them that, hey, this is important, that there will be a return on investment. You might have to go as far as providing them with a cost-benefit analysis, showing the benefits to be derived from a particular training program that you're wanting to implement. Back up one point here. When I was with my second company, we were having a lot of accidents with company vehicles. I recommended that we implement a defensive driving program for all drivers of company vehicles. And I showed them, hey, this is how much we're spending on accidents now. If we can reduce this by even 10% by implementing this defensive driving program, that will be a positive return on investment. And it was much more successful than a 10% reduction. It was probably, I'd have to go back and look at my numbers, at least a 60% reduction in vehicular incidents once we had everyone in the company trained in that defensive driving program. We did it all in-house. It was relatively inexpensive, and it was relatively effective. It was very effective as far as eliminating a lot of the little minor incidents that we were having. A lot of the incidents that we had with our drivers, they would back into another pickup. They would have a fender bender in a restaurant parking lot, those types of things. But there were also two major accidents when I was with that company that resulted in fatalities on the highway. Cost-benefit analysis was successful in persuading upper management to let me do that training. And the training was valuable. It proved to be valuable for the company. Another way to persuade management that training is necessary is by showing them the OSHA regulations. There's a whole book of OSHA regulations that shows what training programs are required. Training is required by OSHA regulations. A lot of different OSHA regulations require training for workers exposed to certain types of hazards. So, when it comes to actually conducting the training, the more hands-on the training, the better. I think that's true with just about any kind of training. The more real you can make it, the better. It doesn't necessarily have to always be hands-on, but the more real you can make it, the better. If you have let's say you have the option of using pictures or words. Well, use pictures and words in your training. That's going to be more real. That's going to be more effective than just one or the other. Make sure the training is more than check the box. Check the box training. And there's a lot of it out there in safety management. It needs to be effective training. If you're just checking the box, you might as well not be doing it at all. And an example of check the box training. OSHA requires any powered industrial truck operator to be certified. Powered industrial truck, same as a forklift. Forklift operators have to be certified. A lot of companies do their own in-house training. They'll show them a 20-minute video and a 10-minute true-false test, and then another 5-minute driving test, and they're certified. If you can certify a forklift operator in less than an hour, it's check the box training. It's just doing the bare minimum to meet the OSHA requirements, and it's not really there's not really any value in it beyond meeting the OSHA requirements. But again, that's all some companies are interested in, meeting the OSHA requirements. Safety training is generally geared toward working adults, so you have to take that into consideration. There are materials available to help trainers better prepare for training working adults. When you become involved in this work, doing training with working adults, I recommend that you take a Train the Trainer class, and that Train the Trainer class, along with reading some books, will help you be better prepared to go into the classroom and you're the youngest person in the classroom. That's kind of intimidating. I remember when I first started as a safety professional, I first did training. I'd done a lot of training and teaching before that. I was in higher education, then I went into safety management. So I had 12 years of experience before I ever did my first OSHA 10-hour class or safety training class. But still, it was intimidating because I was in a room with workers who had 35 years experience, who knew a lot about what I was getting ready to talk about. So, and I had to make sure that I wasn't wasting their time. I needed to make sure that the training was to the point, that it would get them what they needed, and not waste too much of their time. There's a whole checklist of points that we need to make sure that we're considering when we're working with adults. It's a lot different than teaching or training, say, high school students or even college, traditional college students. When we do training, we need to make sure it's documented. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. Sign-in sheets need to be used. Curriculum also is a way of documenting our training. Our curriculum documentation could include a lesson plan, the outlines, the PowerPoints that we're using, if we're using PowerPoint. A description of any hands-on activities, if you're doing, say, a rigging class, and you have them do some rigging exercises, document the procedure for those hands-on rigging exercises. Another thing that you can do, see if I've got that, no, I don't have it here. Another thing you can do, say with the hands-on activities, is a videotape session. A videotape of them performing the activities. Excellent documentation, especially if they're doing it correctly. It's excellent documentation. If they're doing it incorrectly, then there needs to also be video of you showing them how to do it correctly. Could also, video documentation could also be used with, say, a forklift certification class. Exams are also a good way of documenting training. It's proof that the material was covered and the learners left the training room knowing the material. That if there was ever a lawsuit and someone questioned the effectiveness of the training, but you had the exams showing that they knew the material, that's going to be a very good defense in that particular lawsuit. And documentation is important for just about every dimension of safety management. Inspections, training, other activities that we perform needs to be documented, because it all goes back up to this first statement in quotation marks. Many agencies out there, like OSHA, they kind of take this attitude: if it's not written down, it didn't happen. If you don't have a written document, you have no proof it happened. And when I say written document, in this day and age, it could be a document in digital form. It could be a PDF on a computer, but you need some type of documentation with sign-in sheets and maybe some of these other supporting pieces of evidence also. And one of these days, when you're doing safety training, and in the not too near future, you might be standing in front of a group like this doing a mass safety meeting, doing a 10-minute safety talk on fall protection or excavation safety or something along those lines. At Kiewit, every month, we had mass safety meetings on every job. And some of those big Kiewit jobs, you'd be talking to 300 people at the mass safety meeting, which I really wasn't a big fan of the mass safety meetings with 300 people, because nobody's really getting anything out of it, because it's so huge, it's impersonal. Probably 80% of the people, they may be looking at you, but are they really listening? Probably not. I'd rather have small, more personal meetings than the mass meetings. But again, this is something that you might encounter. It's not just construction, it could be manufacturing work or other industries as well, where you have occasional meetings like this, where everybody in the company gets together for a brief training session. Another consideration companies need to make when it comes to the success of their safety program is their hiring practices. Many safety problems can be eliminated during the hiring process, or in the reverse, many safety problems can be created if we're not careful in the hiring process. company, and a lot of this is not always going to be under the umbrella of what the safety manager needs to be doing. It's not going to be a safety manager responsibility as far as the pre-employment screenings and the hiring practices. But if you can have an input in that, maybe you work for a company and they don't do any pre-employment screening, and you can make that recommendation to the HR department. That screening like what I have here on the list can eliminate some of the problems that can be hired into the company. A background inquiry, talking to their references, conducting drug screens, conducting fitness for duty physical examinations, looking at their driving record, looking at their criminal record. All of these different approaches to screening might help us screen out potential safety problems for the company. Now, one thing I do need to mention here, though, I don't want you to get the wrong impression about criminal record. We want to do the screening and know if people we're hiring has a criminal record, but that's not necessarily a reason not to hire them. Some of the best, safest people I've ever worked with were people who had been to prison. We see that a lot in the construction industry. Guys who had made a mistake when they were young, they went to prison, they paid their debt to society. They're out of prison now, and now they're working hard, busting their butt to prove to society that they are good people. And I've never really had any problems with any worker who had a prison record. One worker in particular, he went on and he became the plant manager at one of our concrete plants, and just an excellent guy all the way around, very intelligent. He made the mistake when I think he was in his early 20s. He tried to rob a taco hut, something along those lines, and he got caught. But he came out, and he's one of the best employees I ever worked with, one of the best people I ever worked with. Also, as far as getting new people, getting the right people, and once you hire the people, getting them safely out to the job site and helping them have that proper attitude for working safely, onboarding and orientation process is important. One thing that was cool about the Kiewit onboarding process, we had a go, no-go policy. Normally when new employees are being hired, those new employees go through a series of interviews. They may visit the safety manager. They may be interviewed by the superintendent or the project manager. There's going to be multiple people that person has to pass through before they are officially an employee of the company. At Kiewit, anybody that's in that chain, if they see a red flag with an employee, they can deny employment to that candidate. If I'm the safety manager doing the orientation with a new employee and there's something that just doesn't seem right about a person, I can say, hey, we should not hire this person. Same thing with the superintendent or the hiring manager or someone else within this process. Anybody can say go or no go. There was one person I no-go'd at Kiewit. Don't know what her deal was. I think she might have been high, but she was just bouncing off the walls. And I told the site superintendent, I don't think she's a good risk. We need to probably send her home. And he agreed. He backed me up on that, and we did not hire that person. Now, other companies I was with, I wish I'd had that go no go authority, because there was at another company. There's one guy should not have been hired. As soon as he went through orientation, I called the superintendent and said, hey, you need to watch this guy. The guy didn't last a week. He was very unsafe in a lot of different ways. Make sure the worker and the job that they're doing match. You don't want to put someone with a bad back unloading bags of feed. Or you want to make sure there's a good match between what the worker's doing, their job, and what they are physically capable of doing. This is kind of crude here. Keep the good, get rid of the bad. It's nothing personal, but if we hire someone that's going to be hardship for the company or for other employees, we need to get rid of them. It's better to send that person down the road. It's better for them usually, as well as being better for the company and other employees. But where you run into problems when it comes to hiring practices, many industries are starved for workers. Construction being one of those industries. There are a lot of construction companies out there. They will hire anyone with a pulse. If that person is breathing and is able to walk, they have a shot at a job with a lot of construction companies, because very few people want to do that kind of work anymore. Everybody wants an inside job or a job that's not quite as physically demanding. So if you work as a safety manager in construction, you might run into this challenge. They just need people. They need bodies, and some of the bodies that they're willing to hire may end up being a safety problem for the company. Also related to hiring practices, we need to consider the risk tolerance of the individuals we're hiring. Make sure we're getting the right people for the job, the right people who will contribute to good safety performance. What we want to avoid are those individuals with high risk tolerance. High risk tolerance people are workers who are risk takers. That they're not afraid of anything. They think they're bulletproof. They don't recognize the danger. Maybe they recognize the danger but just think it doesn't apply to them. Oh, it happens to other people. It's not going to happen to me. Worked with a few guys like this over the years in the construction industry. One of them he had lost before he committed suicide. I really liked him. He was such a wild card. I think he had lost 4 or 5 fingers, several fingers off of each hand he had lost. I mean, nothing scared the guy. He would do anything at any time. He had high risk tolerance, which is not good. Another thing that oftentimes goes along with the high risk tolerance workers, they have this tough guy mentality. They kind of have a carelessness that goes along with them. We run into this a lot in some industries, construction, oil field, but it's not conducive to good safety performance. Moderate risk tolerance, they recognize and understand the danger, then they consider alternatives when facing a dangerous task. I'm good with moderate risk tolerance type workers. Low risk tolerance, recognize and understands the danger and will not perform a task unless the hazard is controlled. This is what we want here. I mean, it doesn't always have to be to this extreme, but if we can, avoid the high risk tolerance workers. The high risk tolerance workers will, again, they're not only putting themselves in danger, they could be putting other people in danger as well. And that's the real concern there. I'm going to take this video out a little longer because I just have a couple of more slides to get through. Another element for effective safety management is the use of third-party consultation. Now, there are companies out there, they can do it all in-house. They don't need consultants. They can do their own auditing. They can do their own training. They can do their own everything. But a third-party consultant is valuable. They're another set of eyes. They're going to be more objective, and because they're more objective, they see things that we don't see when we're out there every day. Third-party consultation is well worth the money that is spent on that consultation if we have to pay for it. But there are also opportunities for free consultation. Our insurance loss prevention specialists, the insurance company that we use, they will send out loss prevention specialists that provide free consultation services. They provide that other set of more objective eyes. They'll see things that maybe we missed, or maybe our safety management system missed. Another option for free consultation is the Oklahoma Department of Labor OSHA consultation services that I mentioned previously. this is free to companies. They tend to prefer, I believe, working with smaller companies, but they are there for companies in the state of Oklahoma that need some consultation service. One other thing I should say about this, the director of this program, write his name down here, is a graduate of our program. One of the big supporters of our program is Jason Hudson, one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. He has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Northeastern, and he's the head of the Oklahoma Department of Labor Consultation Service that we're talking about. And he's told me many times, if you have any students who have any questions, have them give me a call. And occasionally they'll bring in some interns into the Oklahoma Department of Labor to get our students some experience. So another way of getting another set of eyes would be having employees from another division of a company come to your division to give you their perspective. What are they seeing? We would do this at Kiewit. We would have personnel from one division do inspections and audits for operations in another division. We would swap around. This is another way of getting another set of eyes, a more objective set of eyes on our operations. Our goal here is to not hide things. Our goal here is to identify potential problems so we can get them corrected. But that's another thing about the reactive companies. Reactive companies, they don't really want third-party inspectors coming in and telling them that they're doing it wrong. They'd rather deny that they're doing anything wrong, live in denial, and ignore it until something bad happens. So, companies with the strongest safety programs, the companies that really don't need third-party consultation, but because they care so much about safety and it is so important to them, they hire third-party consultants. Last thing I want to talk about as far as safety management, this is more at the personal level. You as a safety manager working with others, and I've kind of mentioned this already. Building relationships. I think it's, if not the most important part of safety management, it's right up there in the top 2 or 3. Treat people with respect, build those relationships, encourage them, recognize their effort and their quality, show them that you care about them and their family. That's going to help you build that relationship with that person. You're going to be able to earn their trust. And once you earn their trust and you build that relationship, once that they know that you are there for them and that you're not there to get them in trouble, they're going to do anything they can for you. They will. I've got 100 guys right now I could call if I needed a new driveway because of the relationship that was built with them over the years. Guys I haven't seen in 10 years, I could call and say, hey, can you come over and help me pour a driveway this weekend? They would be more than happy to do that because of the relationships. And it's building relationships, especially for you men and women who will just be starting out. It's a lot more important than all of the head knowledge that you have. It's your people skills that are going to get you started in the profession and help you to have early success in the profession. Showing the workers that you're not out there, showing them that you're not a safety cop, showing them that you're there to help them, you're there to make their lives better. And once they understand that, once you've made that inroad with them, then your job becomes a lot easier. But having said all of that, you are going to encounter what I call the unreachable. There are going to be some workers out there that no matter how hard you try to build that relationship, they don't want anything to do with you. There's not much you can do with those individuals. You can't chase them. You can't make them someone that will work with you. You do what you can, but at some point, If they don't respond to your respectful behavior and your professional behavior and your efforts to show them that you're there to help them, if they don't respond to that, there's not much you can do. Those are the people you might need a stick for occasionally. Earlier we talked about carrot and the stick. Of course, you're not going to beat anybody with a stick, but there's some people, they're not open to the kind of relationship that really is beneficial from a safety management standpoint. But you do your best. And one thing about most people are reachable. I mean, I could tell you a few stories about workers that I didn't know if I would ever break through with them. They were just so hardcore. They had such a bad attitude towards safety. They had run into safety cops throughout their career, people that would beat them up and write them up, not literally beat them up, but beat them up mentally, tell them how bad they were and tell them how unsafe they were and all of that stuff. They had so many experiences with those kinds of safety professionals that they weren't open at all. Here I am, the new safety manager coming in, and they didn't want anything to do with me. But I was able to get through. It took 6-8 months at times to finally get them to the point where they trusted me. But it eventually happened. I don't know that I've ever had really any workers that I would classify as unreachable. I don't want to waste any more of your time, but you're getting the point here. Building those relationships is a big part of the safety management profession. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. When we come back in the last video for this unit, I think it'll be the last video, we're going to talk about safety management systems. And you're probably thinking, well, isn't that what we've been talking about? Well, we have been talking about safety management systems, but I'm going to talk about a different type of safety management system in the last video.